the mother who walked into a luxury store as the rain was falling hard in Chennai. Heavy drops pounded the streets, turning dust to mud and slowing traffic to a crawl. People ran for shelter, holding bags over their heads, jumping over puddles, and shouting at auto drivers. Under a small blue umbrella, a woman walked slowly toward a building with shining windows and golden lettering. Her sari was damp at the edges, and her sandals slipped slightly on the wet pavement. Her name was Lakshmi. She had never been inside a place like this. The window showed handbags and shoes, things she had only seen in magazines or on the arms of women in airport lounges. The prices were not written anywhere. That meant they were expensive. Too expensive? But she kept walking, holding the edge of her sari tight, her mind steady. She was not here for herself. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. Soft music played, and the walls glowed with warm light. A man in a suit looked up from behind a counter. Another young woman, wearing perfect makeup and a tight black dress, gave Lakshmi a long look. They did not smile. Lakshmi walked slowly to the store. She saw a handbag that looked strong and beautiful. Her son had told her about this brand. He said she deserved something special. He had sent her money. Buy something nice, he said. You've given me everything. But now, standing in this store, Lakshmi felt small. She was used to markets, to bargaining, to counting every rupee. She had never held something worth this much. The woman in the black dress walked toward her. Can I help you? She asked, her voice sharp and cold. Lakshmi smiled softly. Yes, my son. He told me to buy something. I want to see that bag, please. The woman's eyebrows rose. She glanced at Lakshmi's sari, her wet sandals, her hands, strong hands, dark from years of cooking and washing and working. The woman did not move toward the bag. That one is very expensive, she said. We only show it by request. Do you have an appointment? Lakshmi's smile faded a little. No, I didn't know. I just came. My son sent money. I have it here. She opened her small purse, carefully pulling out a folded piece of paper. It was a printed receipt from a money transfer. A large amount, but the woman did not look. Madam, this is a private luxury store. We don't accept walk-ins. Lakshmi stood still for a moment. She looked at the handbag again. She remembered how hard her son had worked, how far he had come. She remembered the nights she stayed awake, sewing and cooking and praying for him. She had not asked for anything in return. Not once. Thank you, she said softly, folding the paper and turning toward the door. Just then, the door opened again. The bell chimed that a man stepped in, tall, quiet, dressed simply in a gray jacket and dark jeans. His eyes scanned the room. Quickly, when they landed on Lakshmi, his expression changed. He said. Lakshmi looked up, surprised. Sundar? She breathed up. The man walked quickly to her, smiling now. He bent down and touched her feet gently. Why didn't you wait for me? I said I'd meet you here. The woman in the black dress stared at him. Her face changed slowly as she recognized him. Sundar Pichai, CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the world. He stood up and looked at the store staff. Did you help my mother? He asked calmly, Datta. Woman's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't have an appointment. Sundar looked at her, his face unreadable. She doesn't need an appointment. She's the reason I am who I am. Lakshmi touched his arm. It's okay, Kanna. Let's just go. But Sundar shook his head. No, Amma. Today you choose whatever you like. He turned to the woman. Bring her that bag. Every color you have. The staff rushed to obey. The silence in the store was deep now. No music, no whispers. Only the soft rustle of cloth as Lakshmi touched the bags, trying to understand their worth. Not in rupees, but in respect. She still did not want anything for herself. But today was different. You told me to buy one, she said softly, smiling. At her son, but I think I will buy two. One for me and one for your wife. Sundar laughed. Perfect choice, Amma. But outside, the rain had stopped, and something else was about to begin. Because As Lakshmi picked her bag and walked out of that store with Sundar by her side, someone was watching. A man in a car across the street. Someone who had been looking for Sundar for a long time, and he had a secret that could change everything. Asterisk. The stranger from his past reign had left behind a soft shine on the streets of Chennai. Puddles reflected the sky, now turning a pale blue, and the air was thick with the smell of wet earth. Sundar and Lakshmi stepped out of the store, their hands full of neatly wrapped boxes and shopping bags. For a moment, the world felt quiet, peaceful. They walked slowly, not speaking, letting the moment sink into memory. It wasn't about the bags. It was about what they meant. For Lakshmi, it was the first time in her life someone had looked at her and said, "You deserve this." Sundar's phone buzzed, but he ignored it. Today was about his mother. He looked at her with quiet pride as she admired the box in her hand, reading the brand name carefully, almost like she didn't want to forget how it was spelled. He said gently, "Let's get some coffee before we head home." Lakshmi nodded. "Only if you'll eat something too." "You've become so thin." Sundar smiled, a little embarrassed, as they walked toward a quiet cafe just a few blocks away. What he didn't know was that the man sitting in the car across the street was still watching them. He was wearing sunglasses, though the sky was gray. He had a notebook on his lap, open to a page with Sundar's name written across the top in thick black pen. Below it, photos were clipped to the corners. Photos of Sundar as a boy, of him at eight, of him standing in front of large tech stages, and at the bottom, a picture of a woman, not Lakshmi. Inside the cafe, Sundar and Lakshmi found a small table near the window. The server recognized Sundar right away, his eyes widening, but Sundar put a finger to his lips. "Today, I'm just a son," he said. The boy nodded and walked away, leaving them alone. Lakshmi leaned forward. "Do you remember this place?" she asked. "You used to come here with your friends before exams. You would talk about Silicon Valley, like it was heaven," Sundar chuckled. "We thought computers would save the world. And now you make them." He looked down, his fingers playing with the edge of the napkin. "Sometimes I wonder," he said quietly, "if we lost something along the way." Lakshmi didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "You didn't lose anything, Kenna. You still call me every week. You came all the way home just to see me. You still carry your tiffin box on flights. That's what matters." He smiled again. She always had a way of bringing him back to the ground, like gravity in a world full of clouds. But then the door opened, and the air changed. A tall man walked in. His hair was neatly combed, his steps confident. He looked around slowly, as if scanning the room for something specific. His eyes landed on Sundar. He paused, then walked over. "Mr. Pichai," he said in a voice that didn't match his kind smile. "May I have a word?" Sundar stood up slowly, confused. "Do I know you?" "You don't. But I knew your father." Lakshmi's face froze. Sundar glanced at her, then back at the man. "Who are you?" He asked. "My name is Vivek. I was your father's business partner years ago." The name meant nothing, but the tone did. There was something off about the way he said it. Polite, but heavy. Like a door being closed gently, but firmly. "That's not possible," Sundar said. "My father was a clerk. He didn't have a business partner." Vivek smiled faintly. "Not officially. But there are things you don't know. About the money your family lost. About how your father died. He didn't just collapse, Mr. Pichai. He was pushed. Not by hands, by promises." Lakshmi stood up, slowly, gripping the edge of the table. "That's enough," she said quietly. "Please leave." But Vivek didn't move. "He trusted me, and I failed him. I live with that every day. But I also know something you need to hear. Something that could change the way you see your own success." Sundar stepped forward. "Say what you came to say." "Not here," Vivek said. "Too many years. Come to this address tonight." He handed Sundar a small white card. No name, just a location. Then he turned and walked out without another word. For a long time, neither Sundar nor Lakshmi spoke. The coffee grew cold. Was he telling the truth? Sundar asked finally. Lakshmi looked down at her hands. Your father worked hard. He made mistakes. But he never spoke of anyone named Vivek. If there was something he did it to protect us. Sundar turned the card over in his hand. What if he didn't want us to be protected? What if he wanted us to know one day? Lakshmi reached across the table. Then you must go. But go with your eyes open, Kanna. The past is not always what it seems. Outside, the sky had darkened again. Clouds moved like silent waves over the city. The cafe lights flickered, and Sundar, still holding the card, felt the weight of something much older than success. He had come home to give his mother a gift. Asterisk, but now, the past was about to give him back dot, something he might not be ready to receive. Asterisk, the secret. His father took to the gravy. The card was light, almost weightless. But in Sundar's pocket, it felt like a stone. Every few minutes, his fingers touched it, as if to make sure it hadn't disappeared. As the car moved through the narrow streets of Chennai that evening, the past rose around him like a fog old. Buildings, old faces, old doubts. Lakshmi sat beside him, quiet, her eyes looking out the window, but not seeing what was outside. She was remembering something too. Asterisk. They didn't speak until the car stopped in front of a gate that looked forgotten by time. Rust had claimed its corners, and wild vines had begun to swallow its sides. Behind the gate stood an old bungalow, its paint faded, its windows covered, with wooden shutters. Sundar stepped out first, checking the address. It matched the card. Do you want to wait in the car? He asked his mother. Lakshmi shook her head slowly. If there are truths to hear, let me hear them too. The gate creaked as they pushed it open. The gravel crunched beneath their feet. Somewhere, a dog barked and then fell silent. The front door opened before they could knock. Vivek stood there, dressed the same, as if he had not moved since the afternoon. His eyes went to Lakshmi, then to Sundar, and he stepped aside without a word. The inside of the house smelled of sandalwood and dust. Pictures hung crooked on the walls, some of temples, others of unfamiliar people. A clock ticked loudly, its sound filling the silence between them. Thank you for coming, Vivek said, motioning toward two chairs in the sitting room. Would you like tea? Lakshmi gave a polite smile. No, thank you. They sat. Vivek remained standing. For a moment, he looked unsure of where to begin. Then he walked to a small cupboard, pulled out an old file, and placed it gently on the table between them. Your father's name was Regenath, he said. I met him in 1984. I was working for a startup that imported electronics. He had an idea for a new kind of circuit board. Simple, efficient, affordable. We laughed at him at first. He was just a clerk with no degree, but he had drawing pages and pages of them. He built models using scrap parts from old radios. Sundar leaned forward. My father? He never told us that. Vivek nodded. He was quiet about his dreams. He said family came first. He didn't want to risk your education, but he kept working. After 6 months, we showed his model to an investor in Mumbai. They were impressed. They offered money. Not a lot, but enough to begin. He paused, watching Sundar closely, but there was a problem. Regenath didn't want to patent the design under his name. He said if the business failed, he didn't want to bring shame to your family. So he filed everything under mine. Lakshmi's lips parted, but no sound came. We started production, Vivek continued. For a few months, it went well. We sold the boards to local shops. Then one of our buyers copied the design and sold it to a foreign company. Everything collapsed overnight. The investor pulled out. We had no legal claim to the design because Regenath's name wasn't on anything. Sundar sat back slowly, his heart pounding. He blamed himself, Vivek said. He stopped coming to meetings. He returned to his job. I tried to reach him, but he avoided me. He thought I had betrayed him. Maybe he was right. Maybe I should have done more. Lakshmi whispered. He came home one day with blood on his shirt. He said he fell. Vivek nodded. He had gone to confront the man who stole the design. He was pushed, beaten. He never recovered from that day. Not in body, not in spirit. Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. The clock ticked on. Somewhere outside, a motorbike roared past and faded into the distance. Why are you telling us this now? Sundar asked finally. Because the design, it's still being used. Slightly modified, but the base is the same. It powers components in small phones, in tablets, in smart locks. It helped build the future. And no one knows it came from your father's hands. Vivek opened the file. Inside were yellowed papers, blueprints, receipts, letters. He handed one to Sundar. It was a sketch in his father's handwriting. The lines were sharp, precise, familiar. This is why I followed you today, Vivek said. Not to hurt you. Not to take anything, but to give your father back his place in history. Sundar turned the paper slowly. The world in which he had become a symbol of innovation. It was built on the quiet genius of a man who had never spoken of it. Lakshmi wiped her eyes. He used to sit on the floor for hours. We thought he was repairing things. We didn't know he was building a future. Sundar looked at Vivek. Can this be proven? Yes, he said. But it would take time, and you would have to speak. Sundar stood. Then I will. He never wanted credit, but he deserves to be remembered. As they left the house, the night air hit them like a wave. Sundar walked ahead, the file clutched tightly in his hand. Lakshmi followed, her steps slow but firm. The past was no longer a shadow, it was a doorway. But just as they reached the car, Sundar's phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. A deep voice spoke. Not a greeting, not a question. Stop asking about your father's design, or you will lose more than a name. The line went dead. Sundar stood still. The phone frozen in his hand. Someone else was watching. Someone who didn't want the truth to come out. Asterisk threats. Truths and the legacy no one saw coming. City lights blurred past as the car moved through the streets of Chennai. But Sundar wasn't seeing any of it. His mother sat beside him, silent, her eyes watching his face. He hadn't said a word. Since the call, he just stared at the screen, as if the phone itself had betrayed him. Lakshmi placed a gentle hand on his wrist. Who was it? She asked softly. I don't know, he replied, his voice low and controlled. But they don't want us digging into Appa's work. Lakshmi's fingers tightened. Someone is afraid of the truth. He didn't respond. The file still lay between them on the seat, and Sundar looked down at it now like it was more. Then paper like it was fire. There was something sacred and dangerous about what was inside. His father's name had been silent for years. Buried. Erased. Now it was trying to rise. And someone wanted it pushed back down. The car pulled up outside their old house. The same house where Sundar had grown up, studied under a single bulb, eaten meals on the floor, and listened to his father hum old songs while fixing radios. As they entered, the smell of tamarind rice still hung faintly in the air, familiar and comforting. He placed the file on the table, then locked the door. We don't tell anyone about this. Not yet, he said. Lakshmi nodded. She understood. Her son was no longer just a boy. He had become a man who knew how the world worked, how power worked. And he had enemies now. Later that night, after his mother had gone to bed, Sundar sat alone in the small room that had once been his. The same wooden table, the same uneven wall where he had scratched equations as a child. The city had changed. He had changed. But some things he realized never really left you. He opened the file again, slowly, as if afraid it might fall apart in his hands. Page after page of designs, notes, ideas written in his father's clear handwriting. The date on one of the pages was 3 years before Sundar had received his first computer. 3 years before he even understood what a circuit was. And yet, here it was, his father's vision ahead of its time, simple but revolutionary, a soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. Come in, he said. Lakshmi entered with 2 cups of hot milk. She placed one beside him and sat down on the edge of the bed. I couldn't sleep, she said. Me neither. For a while they said nothing. Just sat together as the night wrapped around the house. Then Lakshmi spoke. There's something I didn't tell you. Not even after we left Vivek's house. Sundar turned toward her, surprised. Your father... Before he died, he gave me a letter. He said I should only give it to you when the time was right. I kept it hidden, not knowing what he meant. She reached into her sari and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Her hands trembled slightly as she passed it to him. Sundar opened it carefully. The handwriting was familiar, neat, thoughtful, written with care. Kenna, if you're reading this, it means you're ready. I could not fight the battles I wanted to, but maybe you can. If the world ever questions who you are or where you come from, tell them this. I may not have left you riches, but I left you something greater, a reason to never forget the power of a simple idea. Never let anyone bury it. Sundar read the letter twice, maybe 3 times. Then he folded it back slowly, pressing it to his chest. The silence between them was thick with emotion. He knew, Sundar whispered. He knew what was happening. Lakshmi nodded. He did, but he also knew who you were becoming. He believed you would find the truth. A thought struck Sundar then. He stood suddenly and walked to his suitcase. From a small pouch, he pulled out a flash drive. I've been collecting data about chipset development over the last 2 decades, he said. It started as research for a keynote, but now it might show something more. He opened his laptop and began cross-checking designs, dates, schematics, patents. As Lakshmi watched, she saw his face change slowly. His eyes sharpened. His hands moved faster. Alma, he said after nearly an hour, look at this. He turned the screen toward her. 2 circuit layouts, one from his father's blueprint, the other from a widely used processor made by a multinational company, one that supplied parts to half the smartphones in the world. Asterisk. The base design was nearly identical. Do you think that's a coincidence? He asked. Lakshmi didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was in front of them. The next day, Sundar made 2 calls. The first was to a retired engineer who once worked in component verification. The second was to a journalist he trusted from his college days, someone who believed in ethics over headlines. He met both of them quietly, away from cameras. He shared the designs, the story, the letter. They listened, asked questions, made promises. Asterisk. And then came the message. Slipped under their front door that evening. A plain envelope. Inside, a photo. It showed Lakshmi standing at a vegetable stall. The image was recent. Someone had been following her. Beneath the photo. A single line was typed. Silence protects the ones you love. Sundar felt his throat tighten. He showed the photo to Lakshmi. Her expression didn't change. Not at first. But then she said something that he would never forget. We were silent for 30 years. And what did it give us? No more silence, Kenna. If they are watching, let them watch. But we will not hide. Sundar took the photo, burned it in the kitchen sink, and watched the edges curl to ash. He knew now that this was no longer about recognition. It was about justice. Not just for his father. But for every dream that had ever been stolen in silence. Asterisk. The price of silence. The following morning, Chennai woke to gray skies and a warm wind that swept dust through the narrow lanes. Sundar stood on the roof of his childhood home, his eyes scanning the skyline. He wasn't looking at anything in particular, just letting the city breathe through him. Below, horns echoed, birds called from wires, and somewhere, an old transistor radio played a song from the past. He remembered how he used to come up here to think. As a boy, he would bring his books and read under the weak sunlight, listening to the sounds of the city and pretending they were part of a larger symphony, one he would one day lead. Now he stood here as a man, holding not dreams but responsibilities. Memories had become evidence. Silence had become danger. And the past had turned into a battlefield he could no longer ignore. Lakshmi appeared at the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. You haven't slept, she said. Sundar turned, nodding. I didn't want to. If I sleep, I might lose this momentum. I feel like everything's finally making sense, Emma. But I also feel watched. Lakshmi walked to his side. We are being watched, but let them watch. They cannot change the truth. He looked at her, truly looked. The lines on her face weren't just from age. They were maps roads of sacrifice, worry, strength. And they reminded him of something he had always known, but never fully understood, that his success had been shaped not only by vision, but by quiet endurance, the kind his mother had lived every single day. They're going to come after me, he said, not directly, through my work. My name, my decisions, one wrong move and everything could collapse. Lakshmi didn't flinch. Then do not move in fear. Move in truth. That day, Sundar met with the journalist again, this time at a hidden location arranged by the engineer. It was a small, empty flat above a closed tailor shop. No cameras, no phones. Just 3 people and a set of documents that now had the power to shake corporations. The engineer, an older man named Ramesh, laid out the timeline. Your father's design was used in a prototype by Barrett Systems in 1989. He sighed. That same model ended up in the hands of a foreign firm 3 years later. From there, it was re-engineered and patented under a different name. We tracked the progression. Small changes. Added layers. But the core stayed the same. He pushed forward 3 photos, 3 circuit boards from 3 different decades. This is what we call design inheritance. It's like DNA. A pattern that doesn't lie. The journalist, an intense young woman named Devika, leaned forward. If we publish this, it will lead to investigations, lawsuits. The tech company in question has deep ties to several governments. Are you prepared for that? Sundar looked down at his father's original sketch. I'm not doing this to punish anyone, he said. I'm doing this so that no one forgets the people who built the world with nothing but their minds and their bare hands. Devika nodded. I'll begin writing. But you need to be ready for blowback. The story was set to go live in 72 hours. But that night, something else happened. A car followed Sundar from a private meeting. He noticed it only after the 3rd turn. He didn't panic. He simply changed his route, heading toward the edge of the city through smaller streets, until the car finally vanished. But the message was clear. Eyes were everywhere now. When he returned home, Lakshmi was waiting. Her expression was calm, but her eyes betrayed her worry. They're testing you, she said. They want to know how far you'll go. I'll go as far as it takes, he replied. But something in him was shifting. Not fear, not regret. Something deeper. He was beginning to understand what his father must have felt. The burden of having a gift too powerful to protect, and a family too dear to risk. That night, he walked into his father's old room. It hadn't changed. The same low bed. The same wooden shelves. And on the top shelf, a box Sundar had not opened in years. Inside were old books, receipts, and a small notebook tied with a red thread. He opened it slowly. It was a journal. Not full of engineering notes, but thoughts. Entries written late at night in soft pencil, dated quietly in the corner. February 12, 1987. Sundar is growing fast. He asked me today how airplanes fly. I tried to explain. His eyes lit up. I think he will go far. June 3rd, 1989, Vivek says we may have a buyer. I'm scared. What if I fail? What if this idea is not enough? October 11th, 1991, the deal has gone bad. I'm being blamed. But I kept quiet. Not for me, for them. November 2nd, 1991, I saw Sundar reading. A book on silicon chips. He does not know he is holding my dream. That's how it should be. December 15th, 1992, if I do not wake one day, let him know this. It is better to be forgotten than to become bitter. Let him live in the light, not my shadows. Sundar closed the journal. He felt a tear slip down his cheek. His father had not fought. Because he was weak, he had stayed silent because he believed his son would one day speak louder than he ever could. Now that moment had come. Early the next morning, just before dawn, Sundar stood before a mirror. He was scheduled to appear at a technology summit later that day. Cameras would be everywhere. Microphones waiting. He looked at himself, not the CEO, not the innovator, not the speaker, just the sundar Sunwoo story. And when he stepped onto that stage that afternoon, the first thing he said was not about innovation. It was about his father. But as his speech echoed through the auditorium, a man in a suit sitting near the back leaned forward and spoke quietly into a phone. He went public, he said. You know what to do? One voice. Millions wristed lights. Were hot above him. Cameras clicked. Phones pointed. The silence in the auditorium was thick waiting, expectant. But Sundar didn't start with his prepared speech about the future of AI or the ethics of machine learning. Instead, he paused, and he looked out into the sea of faces with something in his eyes that wasn't usually there. Pain, memory, purpose. He gripped the sides of the podium, leaned forward slightly, and spoke not as a CEO, not as a leader, but as a son. Before I speak about the future, he began slowly, I want to talk about the past, about a man who never stood on a stage, who never patented anything, who never saw his name on a screen, but who built something that changed lives. He told the room about Raghunath, a man who sketched circuits in the margins of old newspapers, who believed in ideas more than ownership, who stayed silent not because he was weak, but because he loved too deeply to let his family suffer for his pride. He told them about the betrayal, the design, the decades of silence. And then the voice, the one that had told him just days ago, stop asking about your father's design or you will lose more than a name. He didn't name names. He didn't accuse. He simply told the truth. And when he finished, there was no applause, just silence. Long and still, not awkward. Not unsure that the kind of silence that follows something real. But what Sundar didn't know was that the story was already moving. Before he had even finished, their article written by Devika had gone live. Newspapers across the country picked it up. Social media flooded with images of the sketches, comparisons of the circuits, and stories about the quiet genius from Chennai. People began calling Raghunath the invisible engineer. Hashtags trended. Young students post their drawings of their own inventions, writing captions like, for every appa like Sundar's, we promise to keep dreaming. But just as the world was waking up to the truth, forces behind the scenes began moving. The same company whose chip design matched Raghunath's blueprints released a public statement denying everything. They called the claims incomplete. Historical noise and an unfortunate misunderstanding. Then came the lawsuits. Not against Sundar, against Devika, against Ramesh, against the newspaper that had published the piece, claiming defamation, demanding silence. But Sundar had anticipated this. He stood beside them publicly. Legally, financially, he thought it not a fight, but a restoration. This is not about punishment, he said at a press conference. This is about recognition, about respect for the minds history forgot. Behind closed doors, the pressure grew. His board received letters questioning his judgment. Anonymous sources leaked rumors about him being unstable, emotional, distracted. And then one night, while returning from a closed-door panel in Delhi, his car was stopped on a lonely highway by two motorcycles. Masked men approached. Lakshmi, who was in the car with him again, gripped his hand, but Sundar didn't panic. He rolled down the window. The man closest leaned in and whispered, you can end this now. Walk away. Forget the past. Or someone else will forget to spare you next time. Then they left. No confrontation. No violence. Just a warning. But Sundar's decision was already made. And the next morning, he released everything. The original journal,